very brightly colored and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while.
We want to be free to do what we want to do.
Were Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barker, the president of Hell's Angels.
This is 1095.
Miss Naylor?
You know each other?
What are you doing here? You haven't told her? Oh, dear God, no. Today, Miss Naylor, I will be playing the part of your surgeon.
Hey, Olga. Good afternoon. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey.
Good to see you. Good to see you again. It's been. I was trying to think. When did we last? We spoke probably. It's probably a month ago. Maybe it was longer when we caught up for an afternoon coffee. But how are you doing?
God, that is a general and a very large question. Overall, I think I'm pretty good. Lots of existential questions, as always, as I'm sure a lot of people are having them, especially right now.
Cool. Wow, that sounds pretty good. Look, we've got, I really appreciate jumping on the podcast, and obviously want to talk about your work as an actress, and maybe a good starting point is just to, you're at Holby City seems to be the kind of biggest thing in your CV on IMDb. That's where you spent quite a bit of time. You've done other stuff though, and movies, but getting into the UK, how did you end up in the UK? End up in, a kind of mainstream UK soap opera, if that is how you would label Holby City. So yeah,
it's not a soap opera.
Okay, all right, go on. What is it?
Continuing drama.
Okay.
Different, very different awards, different categories. How did I end up in the UK? So I, after I was born and raised in Ukraine, I ended up going to school in the States. And after I graduated and spent a year doing almost non-paying, but very avant-garde and very awesome theater in New York and Boston, I had to decide where to go after that. And London has always been kind of one of the places on my list. And at the time, your government and immigration authorities had a very good scheme where they allowed young people to come in who were promising so-called high earners, strange formulation, potential high earners, not at the time. So I came to the UK and I applied for this particular scheme, and the rest is history. Yeah, it was for freelancers, which allowed me to do arts.
And did you went to university in the US, but you didn't go to? Did you go to formal acting school, or after that, or was it something you did at uni and then that got you realized, hey, I'm on this path, I want to be an actress?
Well, not as such. I went to school for political science and Romance languages, and I was going to be a diplomat. And I was very much into disarmament and weapons of mass destruction. Not into them, but I guess learning the progress that the world is making and eliminating those terrible, weapons that we're still facing, dealing with. But then somewhere there, I went to audition for a play, and my school had a really big regional theater attached to it where a lot of theater kids spend a lot of time. So I ended up getting the part and then getting another one and then another one. And to be honest, in a couple of years, I kind of knew that I would need to break the news to my parents, that I would be changing the direction pretty drastically. And then by the time I graduated, I still graduated with my degree, which I still loved academically, but I spent a lot of time in theater, training, taking classes, American repertory theater, doing a lot of shows with visiting directors, one of whom has become my lifelong mentor and inspiration, really. His name is Jay Scheib. He does phenomenal work all over the world. And I was lucky enough to move straight to off-Broadway after that and work with him there, and then work in Boston with him a bit more before I left for England. So in terms of training, I took classes while at the university. So I studied with the teachers at the American Repertory Theater that undergrads were allowed to take classes from. And then I took an intensive program in New York with Atlantic Theater School, which is David Mamet's school from what I know. And so it's Meisner. And then I also have an amazing uncle who teaches Stanislavski, like the hardcore, very nerdy, amazing poetic version of Stanislavski. So I ended up studying with him when I went to LA, but that was a bit later. But I do not have a conservatory. I almost dropped out of Harvard and like trying to apply to Juilliard, but then they kind of ended up not doing that.
Not a bad thing. It sounds like you had quite a strong theatre foundation though before going into kind of film and TV then, right? Yeah. You did. What is that was that a useful stepping stone? What's the experience of being in theatre? Is it something you saw as, actually, let me rephrase this. What was the motivation to go away from theatre and head towards TV? Was there a particular motivation? Did you just kind of trip into the opportunity, or, how did you get there?
Well, I don't think I'd ever go away from theater. I don't think many actors would ever choose to go away from theater if theater was a way that could allow you to make a living.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, even right now, even in developed countries like the UK or the US, unless you're doing a West End show or a Broadway show, it is very difficult to survive on the salaries of the theaters. And I remember being on Holby City and being offered a part in RSC, and I couldn't take it because the salary was so much lower. And at the time I couldn't do it. And that was a heartbreak because I would have loved to do a theater show after so long in television and film. And yeah, so it was definitely not an intentional thing. Ideally, as it is probably for a lot of people who work in all mediums, is doing a good combination of everything, because it's different. It's just really different. Exercises different parts of you. It takes very different parts of you to come forward. It's a different thrill.
I imagine it. I mean, having, I love theatre and love TV, and but it is very different, right? I mean, that environment, walking into ultimately a live situation, really is what you're always with in theatre, where you are. There's no room for error, but at the same time, there's room for creativity. But it's very different to, I'm learning lines, I'm jumping into scenes in and out, and it's a very different experience, I imagine, the theatre experience versus the not soap opera, the drama of, the Holby City type experience.
Well, I don't think it's easier or more difficult, or it's just learning lines. I mean, it is what you're going to make it. You could phone it in any medium. I mean, with television, you just have camera coming so close to you, and you can work with such subtleties, which obviously it's a little bit more difficult to do with theater, where you have to take into consideration audience hearing and reading you. It is also a whole lot of lines in Holby City, to be honest, a whole lot more than learning just one play. Even if it's the hardest play ever, and it's day in, day out. But your short-term memory gets very, very good.
Yeah, I bet. Do you use the same learning techniques for learning lines when you're, running? Do you want to get that? Is that a phone going?
Oh.
Okay, go on. No, that's right. I'll let you knock it off. Do you have the same when you sit down to learn lines for, something you're doing every day, like Holby City, versus, a theatre production where you're learning it and then you're going in doing the same thing, every day, every week, or whatever? Is it the same process that you use to go and to learn those lines and the delivery of them?
Definitely not.
Interesting.
Well, with the theater, you pretty much have to be completely off book on the entire thing. Well, unless people are rehearsing scene by scene, then it's a little bit easier. With a long running show, as we have talked about a little bit before, sometimes you have to learn lines extremely quickly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a change the day before, sometimes you get a change on the spot. Sometimes you find that there's a minor inconsistency that you would like to work with. So a lot of the times I would learn lines kind of on the day or the day before. So it's very, very different. You do read a script before, you do text analysis, you do know where the story is going, and the meat of the scene and the intention of the scene. But the text has to be really fluid, a lot more, like not necessarily a set in stone as it would be with a full film or a theater production.
Interesting, yeah. Jumping onto maybe sideways a bit, your character in Holby City, your I forget the name, apologies, the gothic nurse character you played. Sorry, go on. What was it? What's the name?
Yeah.
Frieda, okay. Did you have any, was that character given to you like that? Or did you go in and have any influence in terms of how that character was portrayed? Obviously, as an actress, you always do to a degree, but was it, when you auditioned and then when you came in, you knew exactly what you were going to be playing? And then did that change at all over time as you got into the part?
Well, there are a few things that went into it, right? So the first time I started playing her was quite a long time ago now. Almost 10 years. First stint was from 2009. I got a very general description of an emo girl who was supposed to be Polish. And I remember calling my agent and saying, Roxanne, I've decided I will only do films from now on, art films. I will not do anything mainstream. I do not. She's like, no, you need to go do this audition. And I was like, no. She's like, you need to read it. It's really interesting. And I was like, no, I'm staying with the art. She was like, do you understand? Sorry, this is a bit of a... She's like, do you understand what it's like to have a regular paycheck? I was like, no, and I don't want to get used to it. She's like, you need to go.
Sounds like good advice.
Yeah. So thank God I went, and I met a room full of people who clearly very much cared about the new character and they really wanted to get it right. I came in and did what I thought was, I guess, my vision of this person from what I read. And yes, it did change a lot. And I had a lot of freedom to work with it. And I also had a lot of resistance to that freedom, because there were so many interesting stages in that development, which are also really quite positive and demonstrative of sort of how human psychology works. I remember like the costume department obviously was, Helen is an incredible designer, and she was thrilled to have somebody that she could be very, very creative with. And her choices were phenomenal. I mean, especially in the first series. I mean, Frieda was dressed outrageously, but perfectly to the character. My contribution was I did as much research as I could, and I went and met as many Goths of various directions as I could. Even tried to date one. Didn't work out at all. Like full rejection. I was way too square for the guy. I'm serious. That actually happened. And I'm in the Camden market, and I really tried for the art, obviously.
Yeah.
But so it was obviously a huge collaborative effort, but I did have a lot of input, thankfully, and I did a lot of research on it and a lot of reading, and fought adamantly to keep her as flamboyant, as expressed as possible. And producers understandably were a bit concerned, and at the beginning they only signed me for 6 months, which a standard term on Holby City is about 2 years for a new character, usually, from what I understood. And they only assigned me for 6 months because they really weren't sure if the character was going to work. And it did, thankfully. And it was a great credit to British public, because I think people were worried that, people were, I mean, the producers were worried that people might not be ready for somebody as expressed, forgive me, foreign, in a position of a professional position, and somebody who speaks their mind. But we do know that characters who speak what everyone else thinks are usually quite popular, because most of us wish we could say exactly what we thought, but often we hold back for various reasons. But we do love people who do that. And so Frieda was exactly that. Frieda was saying exactly what everybody might have been thinking, or not even finishing the thought on that thing, like completely, right? Not even finishing maybe the sentence in their head, but she would just say it. And I guess
it's interesting. I was trying to think of a word to describe that the character, actually, and as you were talking, the word in my head was there's a cheekiness to that character. But interestingly, that's probably my English conditioning to you shouldn't really say what you're thinking, right? Because actually that is you just summed it up exactly. That she just says exactly what's in her head. And it's a real fun character. Instantly, you don't even have to, even if you just watch clips actually and of certain scenes, there's a real fun to her character. It must have been really enjoyable, I imagine, to play that type of character.
Absolutely. It's one of the stages I remember after a few months of playing her and extending the contract, the first one. I remember thinking, like, there are certain things about her that I wish I were. And I was like, and I'm going to practice that. I'm just going to, like, yes, I am pretty direct and often inappropriate in some ways, but sometimes I still, it's everybody has a bit of a people pleaser here and there and don't necessarily say the exact thing that they're thinking. And so I was like, you know what? Like, this is what I'm going to practice. Like, in this character, these are the qualities that I'm going to grow in the character and in myself. Like 100% integrity, say exactly what's right, say exactly the truth, to tell exactly the truth. And yeah, that was one of, like, I remember sort of finding another core quality to the person, which made it a lot easier. It sort of clicked then back in very easily every day when I came in. I knew where she was coming from. And then when the text or the script was going somewhere where it really didn't make sense, I'd fight it. And sometimes, they'd agree and sometimes the producers would disagree. But yeah, you saw the result anyway.
Yeah, it's good. And it must be very interesting when you're playing a character in a TV show that's on for an extended period of time, because like what was the longest period you were playing that part? It was a few years, right? You were playing her in one stint.
Yeah, the first stint was 2 years.
Okay.
And the second one, 7 years later, was also 2 years, but I requested breaks between, like, every 3 months, because I felt like I was really wiped out and I didn't have much to give. And so that was kind of one of the conditions when I was going in, and they were very understanding. And I think it makes a lot of sense with that kind of grueling schedule. For me, at least it did. Some people are a lot stronger. Yeah,
I mean, what I was going to say is, when you're playing one character for a 2-year period like that, I mean, when you're looking at specific qualities that you may or may not have yourself, but the character has, and you're having to work on those. I mean, that obviously you switch on when you go onto set, but is it something that's kind of with you outside of that process, where you're really kind of, interacting in daily life and looking at, how would Frieda do that and taking that back to set? Or was it literally like, hey, learn my lines, go in, turn on, become the character? Is there, is it a kind of black and white process like that? Or is it something where you're thinking about the character because you're learning, in everyday life, how Frieda might react versus Olga in certain situations?
I guess I come from a school where I don't believe that one becomes a character. I sort of believe that character really is created from externals. It's the accent, it's the behavior, it's the costume, it's the subtleties. But really all you have is yourself and various parts of yourself that you might not have known you have. You might not have known how to use, but you still just have yourself.
Yeah.
You can go very deeply into a part of yourself where your own identification can start changing. I've had glimpses of that. I haven't done what people call full-on method, but I've had glimpses of that. And I've had glimpses where things start to leak into your personal life even. I mean, I've had friends and even my boyfriend go, oh man, like that's Frieda. Or like, can you see where, and sometimes I would catch myself even, I was like, this is not me talking. This is this part that I've developed and that has like this pathway within me that if I click into it, it just goes. It starts to behave that way. It even the accent returns a little bit. So there's that. So I feel like it leaks into your personal life. And if you've worked on somebody for so long, it's like a pathway in your brain, I believe, that you kind of end up sometimes stepping back into. But I mean, have I walked around thinking what Frieda would do? All the time, actually. I mean, the truth is that when you're analyzing the script, I would get, really into it because you want to, sometimes the character just like certain things that were written seemed really inconsistent. And that wasn't always the case. It was just sometimes simplification of what I thought her to be. And then the writers would explain to me and help me understand how the complexity fits together. And so you end up thinking about pretty much every word and everything. And when you're completely convinced that your character will not say this and will not do this, the amazing thing on the show was that you had this space to discuss that. And if you had a good case, because after all, you've been playing, like I've been playing this character, say for 4 years, right? There were people there who played their characters for 10, 13 years. They have a really good reason to give feedback because writers come and go and directors come and go, but you're carrying this person. And so if you have a really good case around like why this psychological choice really makes no sense, or, they'll listen to you. And that was amazing. Like there was a lot of back and forth, in fact.
Really fun, really enjoyable to be able to take that creative process into a show like that rather than just be, looking at lines. So
look, the bottom line is like some people might enjoy simply coming in and saying the lines or making them work the way they are. And when, it's absolute brilliant, if you take classics, obviously you just do that and you find your way through it and you learn through that process because the text is so brilliant. But often on the long running show, no matter how tremendously talented and good the writers are, there's also speed involved. There's time and people can miss something. And when you are a part of the creative process, you're a lot more likely, the atmosphere on set completely changes. Like with the directors who allow a lot more of that collaboration, they get very different work. There's no way around it. And yes, there are some people who have very strict vision and it still works. But my favorite, times on set are when you are discussing something and you're either being understood and accepted or you're being shown something that you haven't seen. That's ultimately the stretch, the growth. You want the director or the writers who you're working with to stretch you, to make you see something differently. Or at the very least to collaborate with you when you're finding something that they might not be seeing.
That character as well, you mentioned before, I would say would have stood out because of being, foreign and being gothic or emo, I think is the word used. That's for me, the word's goth because I grew up in that era, but emo or goth. But because of those two characters, did you end up getting kind of fan mail or people kind of sending you stuff where you'd heard that it had helped them in terms of, the fact you were playing this slightly alternative character inside a traditional working environment of the hospital? Did you hear from people? Was there kind of rewarding feedback and stuff from the general public on that?
Yeah, I mean, the fans were quite amazing. I got a lot of really interesting. It was my first experience of like that, like amount of fan mail, and like the majority of it is just asking for an autograph or asking for a picture or whatnot. But sometimes you get this like heart melting stories, you know, where like, I mean, one that really stuck with me that I think I might have told you about before. This kid writing and going, "Oh, I used to be bullied so much because I was a goth, and now because of Frieda, I'm cool. Like nobody bullies me anymore." And like I bawled my eyes out. They had to redo my whole like makeup, and now that was just so beautiful. And there were others as well. Sort of kids really finding strength in that character, I mean, we all do that. I mean, that's the function of the art. That's the function of like this particular medium. Like I still find myself emotionally learning from certain shows. Like there's this show that I've been watching, don't judge. Anyway, well, actually you can't judge. I still love it. It's called The Bold Type. And I sometimes watch it and I literally feel like I'm being like emotionally educated about certain choices in life. And I was like, wow. So I guess I'm hoping that
what's it called? Sorry, I didn't catch it. The Bolt Type. The
Bold Type. It's about 3 late 20s women in New York City making their way in a feminist magazine. And I gotta say, like it's been a really enjoyable watch, and it's been something that I found myself learning from. And sometimes, I mean, that's what you wish for. I mean, even if it's a little bit simplified, even if it's a little bit on the head sometimes, ideally not, but I'm hoping that that's what Frieda was to some people, and from some of the fan mail, it appears to be that that's exactly what happened. And, you know, those are the moments when you go, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing it. So
that's cool. I think that must be really satisfying. I assume there would have been some nice moments where you got good feedback on a character like that. So I was a goth for 2 or 3 years as a kid, so I can relate. And I think back then, so I'm going back a while now, in the late 80s, early 90s, you know, I think I just got like jeered at in the street and pointed at. I was like 16, 17, and you know, it was all music related actually at that point in time. Probably still is, I don't know, but it was a group of us all came down to the music we're into, but there was massive kind of disassociation from people around you, you know, not just because of then it was like dark colors, dyed hair, makeup, you know, it was kind of just another era of, and then that's now, I think now it's just seen as another part of, you know, fashion society or whatever we want to call it. But yeah, so interesting. It's good to hear some good stories. So
where was I going?
I don't know. You said something. I didn't hear you. Cut out. I think I talked over you, but go on.
I'm trying to remember if there were any other kind of beautiful or hilarious stories. Oh yeah. There was one time that I got a letter from Dr. Petrenko, literal like Dr. Petrenko, who works in one of the UK hospitals somewhere in the Midlands, I believe. And she was like, "Hello, you don't know me," but I don't know her accent, obviously. I just went into she's like, "You don't know me, but I've had my nurses laugh at me for a really long time now, and I couldn't figure out why." And they finally told me. So she's an actual Ukrainian doctor working in the UK, and her name is her last name is Petrenko. So,
oh, that's quite a coincidence. So,
apparently, she had a lot of insider jokes that she wasn't privy to for a while.
I really wanted to. I've got about 10. What are we on? I've got about 15 minutes left, maybe. So, and there's a couple of things I really want to ask. I mean, one we chatted briefly before, but you know, diversity in TV and films, and you know, in terms of where it's at. There's been a lot of happening in the last 4 or 5 years. A real effort, you know, after the Weinstein stuff, to try and kind of re-engineer Hollywood. I don't know if my knowledge is not wide enough to see if that's being done everywhere enough in TV. But do you see a different industry today than you saw 10 years ago, at a personal level? Even, have you seen it in terms of number of auditions, the number of opportunities for women? Has it, is it heading in the right direction? Does more need to be done? Is there a different industry now than there was 10 years ago? I know there's lots of questions in there, but I think which we can unpack, but just really want to get your kind of view on it, and I'll dig down a bit more as you talk about it.
So let me make sure that I understand you correctly. You are asking about gender diversity right now.
Well, actually, I am, but I'm talking, and this is a good question, right? Yes, I was. The question was gender diversity. However, when I'm watching, shows on Netflix now, and I'm looking at, how is there more of a focus on diversity? I'm actually not thinking gender, because it's everything. It's also, race diversity, gender diversity. Yeah. So I was asking from a gender perspective, but doesn't mean you have to answer from that perspective, because actually I'm just talking diversity, really, and it's interesting to hear an actress's response to this, because I'm asking based on a perception of what I'm see, happening in things I watch. There's way more content now, for example, on Netflix, with female lead roles, with casts where you got women in more roles. That's what I'm seeing anyway. I don't know if I notice it actually across race, if I'm honest, but you might tell me, yeah, there is an effort in terms of how that's changing TV. So,
well, I think I can only speak from my own perspective, and I am a white-looking female actress, right? I'm not white. I'm actually mixed, but it doesn't show so much. So, and I also face a different set of challenges. At least I did for a really long time, and I still do in the UK, because I'm not British and because I do not speak a perfect RP or any other of the British dialects. So it's a different set of challenges for me that I could talk about for a long time. But in terms of, I'm going to start with gender diversity, right? So is the industry different? Definitely different. Is it better? Yes, in some ways it is better. In some ways, we could do so much more. Seriously, we could do so much more. Some things, where do I start on that? As Frances McDormand once said, women do not need help, we just need money. We'll make sure to make our own movies. So, and I really like that. I was like, yeah, it's exactly that. Are there enough parts for women? I don't think so. Are there enough really substantial parts for women? Also don't think so. I still often watch a film where there is 4 men in, if it's an ensemble cast, and there'll be 4 men and 1 woman. And there's absolutely no reason why any of the other parts could not be a woman. So there's that. I definitely noticed that, and it definitely feels this way. UK and the US and Europe is probably a lot further ahead in taking women out of just the stereotypical female roles. Well, sometimes when I look at the Russian industry or, whatever I know about the Ukrainian one, there the stereotypes and the archetypes are still so incredibly ingrained. There isn't really much movement. What else?
What were you just said your situation was different. I don't see it necessarily as different. I think your view is really interesting. And you said you had a different set of challenges coming to the UK. So what were those? Because what were the challenges? You're coming in as someone from Ukraine that's been educated overseas, that is looking for certain parts. The challenges are your ability to audition based on your background, or the number of parts available because of what you're able to play? Like what were those challenges? It's interesting to understand, because that, I think, totally does map into this same issues around diversity and what are the answers. So yeah.
I mean, I think sort of my issues might fit into the diversity within the UK, because there are quite a few Eastern Europeans now working in the UK. I'm not sure what's going to happen after Brexit, but so many of us are in the fabric of, the British society, as well as all the other nationalities and races. And for me, when I came to London, after I met with a few agents, what I heard most often was this: you look Eastern European, you sound sort of American, we don't know what to do with you. And so only when I went and my commercial agent at the time, who didn't really care how I sounded, he got me a skins job for the first time. And so only after I got a job and there started appearing other Eastern European roles more often, did agents decide to consider, even signing me, because they didn't. So there's a really important strata, I guess, of new sort of people, right, who are born in one place, raised in another, educated in the third, and live in 50 others. I mean, it's third culture kids, it's third culture adults. Most of them don't sound like they're from a really specific place. They also don't behave it. Their psychology is different. Their sociology is different. Their psychology is primarily different because their sense of belonging is very, very different. It doesn't belong to, we don't have a belonging to a place. It's most often the group of people that we feel at home with. And it's interesting. It really helped me at a certain point once I started delving into the understanding of the third culture, which is now, so many people are living this way. It kind of helped me to see why it was difficult for me to belong anywhere and at the same time everywhere. And it also really clarified sort of what it is that I was looking for in some ways. I mean, a sense of home, but I was looking for it in a different place than, I think my psychology has developed to look, to want. So my challenges were literally industry looking at me, people looking at me, agents looking at me, and not understanding what to do with me. I've also had things where, as any other woman, I've literally had an agent tell me, well, you really need to start reconsidering your career now. You're going to be almost 30. I mean, I laughed, that was a woman who told me that. And she's phenomenal. And she lives a really beautiful, emancipated life. And yet, they feel the need to tell that to their actresses because that's still what's happening in the industry. It's changing. It's slowly changing. But I mean,
and that kind of response is what? Because they're saying, the number of parts you're going to get when you get over a certain age, it's just not going to be the parts for a woman. Is that what you're saying? I mean,
quality, your expiration date, all of that. And
is that, I mean, this might sound naive, but is that a female thing or is that an acting thing? Because would you get the same as a guy or would you not? And also, I never understand this as well, because I was chatting to my mum actually about this. So I keep telling my mum, she's 70, to go back and audition for some parts because she's a great. And so I'm like, when you watch anything, a film, a TV show, there are people of all ages on screen. So I'm like, of course, but then the opportunity for lead parts is clearly, clearly going to be less. But is that so? What you're saying, that's a lot more of a.
Let me ask you this. What does it mean to have a lead part? What does that mean in terms of the story?
What does it mean to the person taking that part? Or what does it mean to the story? Is that what you're asking?
What does that mean in terms of the story that's being told?
I mean, in a film, let's say you're in a film, the lead part typically is, in 99% of films is really carries the film. It's the central, everything wraps around the protagonist. So yeah,
of that person.
The what? Sorry.
It's the story of that.
Yeah,
person.
Yeah, for sure.
So
it's the protagonist.
How many stories, really? If we're gonna take, that's the whole thing. I don't have the statistics, but I'm pretty sure if we're going to take the content, even from the last year, just 1 year, and we're going to look who are the protagonists of the stories and just chart them, just see how many females of a certain age, how many males of a certain age, race, da 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 da. How many people do you think, how many stories, say, of women you think you're going to see over 50?
Yeah, no idea, but yeah, I get your point. Yeah, no idea, but yeah.
When you say you see people on screen of different ages, it's not the same. It's about what stories are we taking? Like,
Sure.
what stories, who are getting left behind? Who do we actually not think about? Who do we focus our attention on? And why some people are getting so much attention while the others are being, left silent, literally. Because this medium is super powerful. This is what we do now. Like, this is how we consume storytelling. This is in a lot of ways a rite of passage for a lot of people. Like, that's how we learn about the world. And some things are simply not being shown, and people aren't being shown. So, and the amount of time that's devoted to different categories of people is still something that we really need to work on. And that goes into the psychology of the society as much as it does just the practices of the industry and the collective. Yeah.
What on a different subject, how have you, you've obviously, as the whole world has been, spent 18 months, whatever it is now, during this kind of crazy new world we live in. What are you seeing as changes in the industry? I mean, the ability for people to do stuff remotely, and have you been working on stuff, and have you been on set during that time at all, or are you doing stuff remotely? I know that you do a little bit more on the production side, or you're involved in other projects, but
I directed remotely something that actually hasn't been finalized yet. It's not a fictional project. It's more of a documentary and social entrepreneurship. I wasn't on set like for the entire year or more since December 2019, I believe. And the changes, it's really hard to tell what's going on. There's on top of COVID, there's a bunch of other stuff happening, like Brexit, and I'm not gonna go there for now. But there's been a lot of sort of, the industry is waking up. I'm getting a lot more auditions. Most of the auditions are now done on tapes. A lot of them were done on tapes before, but now it's an absolute majority, I think, with some very, very minor exceptions. Is that a good thing? I don't know, honestly, because I still do not know, out of 50 plus tapes that I do per year, how many of them are actually watched, because there's no way to know, because you rarely get feedback. So I don't know if it's a good thing. We're all moving into more of a technological approach, one way or the other. Doing tapes allows you a lot more control over the lighting, over takes, obviously what you choose, how much time you have working on it, but you also don't have the in-person contact with the director and the casting director, and you don't have the live audience, which I personally feed off. So it's hard to tell. I'm hoping we're going to bounce back better than before.
It's the same. I think it's the same across any industry. What you just said then is interesting. Every industry, not every industry, but many industries have been shaken up in this way. And, I spend my days working in the tech industry, and I'm no stranger to Zoom calls, but the lack of face-to-face meetings or interaction is just a whole new way of doing things in certain spaces. So
we're going to be seeing a lot more of like what it does to our interactions, and a lot more analysis of what happens to humans.
What about writing? Have you been doing any writing during the last couple of years? Is it something you focus on as an artist?
Sometimes I focus on it. Sometimes I really don't. Sometimes
that sounds like a writer.
Sometimes I feel like I'd be just really content just acting. I think I would probably be quite satisfied. Although there are times when I really have to sit down and jot down ideas and start working on stories. I haven't started properly writing anything, but I've outlined a few scripts. So there hasn't been a proper writing stint yet.
Have you done any? You obviously understand a script because you've read, because you're an actress. But have you done any formal screenwriting training, or have you kind of been through it? You could sit down, I imagine, and write something. Okay, so you know it from the perspective as an actor. So yeah,
I just read books on it.
Okay. Well, there's some brilliant books. I mean, it's a beautiful, painful process all at the same time, writing, and particularly writing screenplays.
How many drafts have you done now?
That I'm not focused on the draft, but with that particular screen, I was involved in 9 drafts, which, but that's not, I don't know. I mean, it's now at draft 14 and someone else, a director's rewritten it anyway, but yeah, it's such a fascinating creative process to go from, what starts off as this idea and then, gets rewritten. And then when you're collaborating as well, I'm big on collaboration because I think it's great when you have this energy between people that puts something onto a page. It's like, especially if there's 2 of you, maybe 3, but with 2, it's like your minds are together and you're writing, and then here somewhere is the actual thing that's coming together that is external from the process that's going on. And it's almost like this kind of, the cloud, which is a technical thing, but it's almost like the creative cloud. So yeah, anyway, I haven't been involved for some time because it's almost needs full-time dedication when you start writing a screenplay. I mean, it's not something you just kind of do at the weekends, and it's
some people are able to. I mean, some people are really incredible.
I don't think I could ever do it I have to kind of disconnect from everything to do it, which is not practical for me personally. So yeah, but some people can. I mean, some people are very mechanical about being able to just sit down and go, hey, I'm going to put 5 hours into working on my screenplay or whatever. But yeah, not for me. I have to lose myself in it completely for a while to get anywhere with it.
Full immersion. I was just listening to Margaret Atwood interview, and she talks about the fact that really, which the main idea that really stuck with me, seems obvious, but I somehow never fully accepted it, that in order to actually start getting a stream of ideas about something, you really have to fully immerse yourself. And she talks a lot about immersion. She's like, this is how human creativity works. You have to fully immerse yourself in something, and this is how you're going to start generating ideas that don't just come out of nowhere, and I think that really resonated. And that's cool. I guess what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that does make sense to me. I think that's also part of the fun, I think when you're creating something from nothing, which is ultimately, it's an idea. It's the same as a startup business, really, or anything like that, where it starts off as an idea and at the end of it is a product and something that can be shown to the world and takes, tens or hundreds of people to create, which is great. So, but yeah, I think I would agree with that kind of immersing yourself in it is really a valuable part of the process. So.
What are you immersing yourself in right now?
This podcast right at this particular point in time, but but no, I mean, I run a tech business that's related to blockchain, which I won't go into on this podcast. I will bore the audience, but yeah, from a tech startup point of view, I've been involved in startup for 2 years. It's not that far different. I think the creative process of shooting a film has massive parallels to the creative process of building a business, really. It's about an idea, it's about collaboration, it's about bringing resources together, it's about financing, and ultimately then it's about getting a return so you can carry on. So
while keeping the vision all the way through all those things.
Well, yeah, but there's a really key thing to that. I mean, certainly keeping the vision, but being willing enough to creatively let go of it all the time, because what allows it to become a success with anything, I think, is not being too attached to the original idea, because things change, and success is often paid because of accepting the new direction and reworking things. So
I think some people would disagree, like David Lynch, for example.
Yeah, but would he probably would, and I probably wouldn't. I don't have the authority to argue with him on it. But I also
Woody Allen, maybe.
Yeah, but also, and those people are in a league of their own in terms of owning a creative process, I suppose. And I'm talking about a specific way. Maybe that is different. But you're right. Yeah, they would definitely disagree with what I just said.
No.
Hey, I mean, look, I'm pretty much the end, unless there's anything else you wanted to share. I mean, how about if there's anyone, how about advice? What advice would you give people going into the industry now? I mean, just off the back of us talking about these changes, I mean, young actors, actresses, people going, hey, I want to get into a TV show. Anything different that you would now advise basis 10, 15 years ago?
I think the core things is still the same. And I think everybody's figuring them out as they go, but just be clear why you're doing it. I mean, where is your drive coming from? What is it that you actually want? How pure it is? What is it really about? And not to say that there's no validity to something, I don't know, less profound than my deepest heart's desire. This is all that I want to do. But our human psychology is really complex. So it really helps, even for your future work, to truly understand like where your drive is coming from, whether it's, well, there's so many different places you could go into. But it's basically just know your landscape, know your map, know who you are and why you're doing it. That's where like the juice comes from. I mean, the rest is not really, a lot of it is not under your control, but at least you'll know yourself, and you'll know, you'll feel good about doing something in integrity with who you are. And that you cannot go wrong with, I think.
Good advice. Cool. Look, it's been it's been good to chat. I appreciate it. I know we kind of bounced back and forth for a month or so. So it's nice to finally get on here and have a chat. And of course we had the pre-chat before, but good to get on here and nail it down. So cool. I will I'll share your details. Is there any particular I'll share kind of links in the podcast. Is there anywhere particular you direct people to where they want to kind of follow you or learn more? Or I mean, you're on Instagram and you're on other places, or
I mean, Instagram's fine. Sometimes I feel pretty conflicted about it, but a lot of people who follow, I guess, my career follow me on Instagram, and I guess all the other stuff hopefully will just be on the screen.
Sweet. All right, Olga. Well, best of luck, and look after yourself.
Thanks, Matt.
Cheers.
Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barger, the president of the Hells Angels.
This is 1095.